Welcome back, everybody. Yeah, you guys go ahead. I'll open as we go.
Hey, Quinn. Of course, you can't really do as much as you would want during OTAs, but just what have you been able to observe about the guys that have been in the building?
Well, I think the most significant thing is that we've had everybody in the building, which is, I think, reflective of a level of enthusiasm and, a focus on using, all the time that we have, whether it be, the summertime, the preseason, and during the course of the year, whether it be games or practice, to get better. And I think that's, that period that we just concluded is reflective of that.
Aaron Ladd, Atlanta News First. How do you define success for Zachary in his first season in the NBA?
I think I define it for him the same way I would for our other guys. And, really the trajectory of Zach's career, of Trey's career, it sounds a little counterintuitive because you have a veteran player, Bogey's career, all of our younger guys as well, whether it be Dyson, who's just with us. The thing that I would really want to see is, just a consistent, continued improvement. And I think in order to achieve that, adversity is really required. It's a part of the growth process. And I think the thing that, that I've seen from Zach is a young man that's got a really good feel for the game. You can tell he has appreciation for, for every facet of the game, really, and I've seen a work ethic. And I think, that work ethic is something, foundationally that we want to be, part of the identity of our program. So to see him come in with that, and not to be afraid to fail, so to speak. I mean, for any rookie, whether you're the first pick or the 10th pick or the 28th pick, that's something I think that is essential. Thank you.
Hey, Coach, I know it's way too early for lineup rotation type questions.
But you're going to ask it anyway.
Slightly.
All right.
With just the fact that your front office trades away a star and a starter for this team, how do you go about as the coach kind of managing that and determining those decisions of what you're going to do to replace a guy like that? Well,
first, wish DeJounte all the best and what he gave to our program during the time he was here. The players, the new players, looking forward to seeing how they acclimate. Our draft pick, seeing the improvement, not just in the first-year players, but in second and third-year players, and our veteran guys. I think sometimes we can feel like once you're a veteran, that's kind of where it stops. And I think, those guys being focused on getting better. When you have that, you have, an opportunity for the group to collectively improve throughout the year. And I think that's, if there's something that's thematic for our team, it's really that, and that can happen a number of ways. And that's something that you get excited about as a coach, when you see enthusiasm from your players to make that happen. And make no mistake, that's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And as I mentioned, even for an individual player to get better through adversity, and that doesn't mean losing, although, we all know there's no undefeated teams in the NBA, so that's part of it, how you handle winning and losing. But I think that, that focus of being able to, bring focus and intentionality every day to your craft, and not just to your own individual improvement, but to the group's improvement. I think that's part of an identity that I want to see us forge.
You've got a shiny new toy with Zach. Just curious, what have you liked most out of him so far, and what has he done off the court that you've been most impressed by?
Well, we haven't seen a whole lot of not just Zach, but Dyson. We saw Dyson in the Olympics. We've got a number of new players, and I'm looking forward to seeing them, not just individually, but how they all kind of connect together and how they play together. I think that'll be really, really important. The thing that jumps out about Zach is really his work ethic. I think that combination of hard work and being deliberate, intelligent work, is something that bodes well for any young player, as they progress in this league and to begin to find themselves in their individual path, and that's something that I think he's focused on. He from the time that he went through really the end of the Euro Cup season and the playoffs there, to the draft process and the workouts, to summer league, catch your breath, and then come back here for our preseason segment of OTAs. It's that consistent work ethic, even through some times that probably require a level of endurance that not all of us have to face during that process as you're going into your rookie season.
Coach, last season, size and depth kind of problems came up a little, maybe not problems, but just the lack of it came up last season a lot, and they've kind of bolstered it a little bit more with Dyson and Zach and Larry Nance Jr. Just how much versatility does that add to your ability to create different types of rotations and lineups and the like? Yeah.
Well, without being too dramatic, those things did impact last year. Really when we had injuries from the time that Jalen went down in December, and then we wouldn't call Trey one of our bigger players, but certainly that required someone like, Veet. Kobe took his lumps from an injury standpoint, which, I won't say slowed his development, but it changed his path a little bit. He's someone he's been in the gym, every time you turn around. I could say the same thing about Garrison, who's, 6'5", small forward. He may say he's 6'6", I'm not sure, but what he does is shoot the ball. So, a number of guys that we've added, as you mentioned, Larry, who's been a multiple position player, but a center more recently, and a center that's not a 7-foot center, but a player that is capable of playing above the rim and has size. Zach obviously at 6'9", 6'10", size. Dyson 6'7", size. So I think it's important for us to be bigger throughout those positions. It does, that versatility, that size creates versatility because those guys aren't single position players. And that allows them to play in combination. And those combinations are what create depth, that versatility that guys bring when they have, size and length. And I'd like to see those players and others really complement each other, and that's something that when you have those opportunities is a really good thing and a productive thing.
Good morning, Coach. Last year you shared some amazing insight on your process of adapting your offensive system toward the personnel on the roster. Mm-hmm. So with significant roster changes this offseason, what specific offensive concepts might need to adapt to maximize the abilities of those new players while also still carrying forward the things that went well?
Yeah, I think, adaptation offensively is both, individual players and putting them or trying to put them in positions where they can be most successful. And it's also a collective process. You mentioned a few principles. I think, there's an opportunity for us to play more with the pass. I think that has an impact on pace. The quickest way to get the ball across half court is to pass it across half court. That's not to say pushing it on the dribble isn't another way to do that. But we've seen, in a short period of time, not just willing passers, but good passers. And those things, have a way of connecting your team. And, it's not just versatility offensively, but it allows you to play in a way that is a little bit different than we played last year. And I think that can be a real strength of this team.
Hey, Coach. What ways are you looking for Jalen Johnson to improve this season?
Well, Jalen's improvement, last year was something that I think all of us were really excited about. when he hurt his wrist in December, you would have thought that slowed that down. And I thought he came back with the same level of focus. His versatility is something that's really unique. And the times where he played his best basketball last year, he really let the game come to him. And I think when you do have the ability to pass and shoot and handle, it gives you that chance to do that, to be able to impact the game in a variety of ways throughout the course of the game. The one thing that we've continued to impress upon him and that I think he's really embraced is his ability to impact the game defensively as well. Whether that means defensive rebounding, you get back to his versatility. When he gets a defensive rebound, he's a guy that's capable of pushing it in transition and making plays for other people. So with Jalen, it's less about any one thing, albeit I think his focus defensively is an area where he can really, impact winning. But it's really a function of the fact that he can impact the game so many ways, and him allowing himself the opportunity to do that, and not defining himself in any one way.
When you've mentioned Dyson Daniels a couple times here, other than when he's on the court, say with Trey or Jalen, or just in the rotation in general, how does having another playmaker like that alongside those two guys affect ball movement or just how the offense can flow?
Yeah, one of the earlier questions, passing was part of my answer, and I think Dyson is someone that, particularly for his size, a player that can guard multiple positions, his ability to make plays, whether it be off the dribble, or even making a simple pass, his ability to cut, which is, I think, an art form that's a little bit lost in today's NBA. Cutting is something that can go with shooting. They're both equally effective, and you can shoot the ball and cut, but not just cutting to score. I think those are situations where he has the ability to catch the ball on the move and make a play for someone else. Because he really does have a good feel for the game.
Coach, very international roster this year. Up here.
Yeah.
Very international roster this year. You've got Bogdanovic, of course, Serbia, Australia, Czech Republic. You've coached international players in the past, of course, in Utah. How do you find that dynamic when you've got so many players from so many different backgrounds in the locker room to try to communicate effectively so that everyone understands the message and it's clear from you?
This is almost a political question because as far as I can tell, these guys all have one thing in common: is that they love basketball, and people communicate in a lot of different ways. And I think in my experience, where you're from, whether you're from Florida or Washington State, or Australia or France, that commonality that those guys share is really more impactful than various cultures and languages. Certainly, I won't speak to Zach in French and Dyson with an accent and Bogey in Serbian, but it's really a commentary about our game, and I think it's not just interesting, but it's to be celebrated in this game that you do have players from so many different countries. It's reflective of the level of basketball being played, throughout the world. And, it's enriching as well. We talk a lot about, sport enriching our lives and building bridges and learning from each other. And sometimes those things get lost, in your wins and loss, your record, and both can be true. And so I think it's a great thing, and it's reflective of a lot of really positive things that we can all appreciate throughout our culture and this game.
To piggyback on that question, what are your thoughts about what you saw during the Olympics?
Yeah, we had a few guys that really played predominant roles. Dyson in Australia, and their team, which, they've been competitive at a high level internationally for some time. Looking at what Bogey did with Serbia, I think seeing the passion that his team played with and and the way that he played, he was telling me he's defending more now in the international game, so we got to have him continue to do that in the NBA game. Now, I'm saying that in jest, but you know, as much as how they played, I think you can feel it's palpable the passion that those guys have. Zach, who's someone that we're going to see with the French national team here very soon. So fun for us all to follow that. You know, we had a text string across the coaching staff about when those guys were playing and the results of their games and how they played, and you know, had an opportunity to tune in on all those and you know, root for our individual players in addition to, you know, obviously wanting to see the U.S. have the success that they did.
Good morning, Coach.
Morning.
Considering Jalen last year, his impact and the big jump that he made from the year prior, how have you or how will you anticipate like the conversation that you have with him about what kind of attention that he'll see, how it'll be different for him this year, as you can imagine, that coming off of a year like what he did last year, how much different it'll be in terms of the opposition preparing for him?
Yeah, you know, he was someone that I was reminded the other day when I was thinking about our press conference today. I had a press conference before I had a practice when I took over here. And even before the press conference, you know, just seeing the team on film, as little as I was able to watch, but being able to see it, it was clear that Jalen is a player that has tremendous potential. I think he began to realize that potential over the course of last year. And, you know, front and center was just his work ethic, you know, his willingness and, you know, desire to be coached, and that coupled with a real intentional, focused approach to the game. And I think what you'll see as a player, although, you know, he's receiving more attention in a lot of different forms, the thing that he's done, it'll be more of a challenge, but one that I think that he'll, you know, adjust to, is maintaining that focus on his game, not just his game, but how he makes his teammates better. And I won't say shutting out that noise. Sometimes we hear a lot about that. It's more just processing your growth as a player. You know, it's a credit to him that he's getting some of that attention, but that doesn't necessarily have to be distracting. And I think as a young player in this league, his ability to maintain his focus and his work ethic and his intentionality, and see him continue to develop across a number of areas, there's more there. And, you know, no one more than him, you know, he's thirsty for improvement, and that's why we're talking about him.
Yeah, welcome back, Coach.
Thank you.
In the small sample size we saw last year with Onyeka, when he actually ran with the starters, the numbers and the results were fairly positive. He's going into year 5 now. Is this finally the year that we see possibly Onyeka becoming a starter, or is that still Clint's job to lose?
Well, you know, obviously we haven't started training camp yet. So talking about not just Onyeka, Clint, you know, Bogey, DeAndre, Dyson, Jalen, you can go through the whole list of who's starting. And I think the important thing, and you mentioned it at the beginning of the question, is how we're playing. You know, whether or not you're starting, probably more important than starting is finishing the game. And, you know, we're fortunate that we have some players where we're talking about this, right? Because that means we have some guys that are really good basketball players. And at various times, they've all shown that. And I think, you know, consistency of level of play is what we're looking for. Different guys are different in their impact on the game. They're different as far as combinations. And as you said, you know, at the beginning of the question, the sample size, there was a time when we didn't use that word. I don't know when it was, but everybody knows what sample size means now. So even coaches. So I just want to see O continue to take strides, you know, and that's something that he's done. And, you know, there's an opportunity for him to do that, whether he's starting or coming off the bench or finishing. We have to be selfless as a group with respect to those things, because there's going to be times when it's unclear, you know, who's starting, playing, finishing, and you know those decisions are imperfect. You do the best job you can with those things in mind, with respect to what allows you, you know, the best opportunity to win a game.
Hey, Coach. Hey. We saw some moves with the coaching staff, with Steve heading the Skyhawks and then Ryan coming up to the Hawks full time. Just wondering what went into that thought process to putting those guys in those positions.
I think when Ryan and I first talked, he's someone that his experience is unique in that he's coached in the minor leagues before in Toronto. I'm someone, obviously you guys know, that has great respect for the international game. You know, what people don't know about the international game is, as a coach, you're involved in the building process. When I say that, I think the way that relates to coaching is that you have a feel for how a team functions. And his time in London, the things that he was able to do there, the development that we saw, last year in College Park, that was something that I felt would happen. I didn't know the timeline on that. Steve is someone, Coach Cly, that has been with me longer than, well, he and Jeff Watkinson, those two guys, they've been with me a long time. Steve's worked his way up through virtually every role that you can find in a program, and so I think his move to College Park is a reflection of that. The larger, I think, more important insight that you can kind of glean from that is that the way we see the coaching staff across the Hawks and the Skyhawks is I envision that in a very fluid way, where the coach of the Skyhawks and even the assistants, that they're in our gym. The head coach is with the team when we travel, whether it be in the preseason or in the postseason, whenever they're able to, attending the games. That continuity is really, really important, as we use that program for the development of our players. And the players that are there, they're not developing in a vacuum. That's something that, having been in that situation personally, I felt like is really important. And that's a way to maximize that program. So I think for both Ryan and Steve, it's kind of the natural progression of their careers as coaches. And I'm confident, in Steve's ability, to take that program and, to continue to define it as a developmental program. We want that team to win. I think being competitive is part of that. But inherent, in a G League program, is change. And whether it be your roster changes, Ryan had a lot of roster changes last year. You have injuries, you have so many things that go into that. And I think it's a great experience for a coach. And I think, to be able to execute on that, the knowledge that Steve, for instance, has of what we're doing with the Hawks, his ability to contribute to what we're doing, really it gives him an opportunity to execute on the things that we want to see executed on that help the whole organization.
Since you got here, you largely staggered Trey and DeJounte. You were able to do that, kind of run through offense through DeJounte when Trey was on the bench. Without that option now, how do you kind of view that when Trey has to rest, both personnel-wise and also how you might change and how you might operate?
I think the larger question is more about kind of the principles that we want to play with no matter who's in the game. No matter whether it's Trey, or Bogey or Jalen, players are different. And I think the important thing is how they connect with one another. And so in addition to your question, which is a good one, I think it's take it one step further, it's combinations. And, as I mentioned before, our ability to continue to evolve as a program with some of the, the principles that I see as being not just, how a team plays. There isn't some kind of idealistic way to play this game. There's things that you as a coach may embrace because sometimes the style of play is reflective of a deeper level of feeling about the things that that are important to you. But those things are important with respect to a particular team because that's the way you win. You know, it's our Hawks team this year, to me, there's fundamental things that we can do both offensively and defensively, which that's the path to winning. You know, that's the path to being more efficient offensively. So how those players fit together and how we collectively, you know, continue to improve in those areas, I think is more important than any one individual player and what they bring. And then at the same time, you want to try to maximize what each individual player can do. And that also plays into your system. You know, as I said, playing with the pass is something that I think is really important for this group, in part because we have a number of guys that are capable of doing that. Trey may be at the forefront in his ability to pass the ball, but there's different types of passes. And I think this team can really be connected around that, more so than maybe we've seen teams here in the past.
Coach, with the offseason trade to bring in Dyson, a player that you just noted excels as a cutter off the ball, does that change anything in terms of role for Jalen Johnson and maybe how often he has the ball in his hands?
You know, I guess those things are opportunistic. You know, both those guys are in positions as playmakers, regardless of whatever number you assign to them. The thing I get excited about Dyson is his defense, you know, and if defense can create more transition opportunities, whether he's got it or Trey's got it or Jalen's got it or Bogey's got it, I think the other side of that, as you mentioned, is, you know, cutting usually includes running too, and, you know, ability to finish at the rim. And that's something, you know, our ability to finish offensively is important because that's an area where I think we can be better than we have been in the past at really converting when we get to the rim. And as I mentioned, you know, the reason is, as far as like kind of overarching philosophical things, that it's not like we're different than the rest of the league in terms of, you know, taking threes and wanting to attack the rim. The two best offenses in the league last year shot threes. You know, Boston and Indiana led the league in, you know, in getting to the rim. So those aren't irrational goals for a group. And I think both Jalen and Dyson, to the extent that those two guys, I see a number of opportunities for our players and our team to be better collectively than they even are individually. And that's really the definition of a good team, right? That you have a team where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And at the same time, you know, something that you guys have heard me talk a lot about and that I think is incredibly important is those parts themselves to continue to improve. And we think of, you know, player development sometimes just in an individual sense, but I think combinations of players and, you know, whether it be two players, you mentioned Jalen and Dyson, you know, Trey and Jalen, you know, Bogey and Jalen, you know, Dyson and Zach. There's, you know, DeAndre and Trey, you know, how those guys interact with each other, the things that they're working on, the things that they're focused on, and how that impacts how we play collectively is, you know, is kind of the essence of a team getting better. Okay. Welcome back, you guys.